The morning begins the way so many ordinary mornings do. Quiet, unremarkable, and filled with the kind of calm that never announces it is about to be stolen. The sky is clear, washed in a pale blue that promises good weather and an easy day. The mountain stands in the distance, steady and familiar, its tree line dark against the early light. It does not look threatening. It never does. The hikers arrive one by one, their cars pulling into the gravel lot with soft crunches that echo briefly before disappearing into the open air. There is laughter, low, casual, unguarded. The kind of laughter that belongs to people who believe the day will end exactly as planned. Backpacks are lifted from trunks. Zippers are checked. Water bottles clink softly. Someone adjusts a shoulder strap, tugging it tighter, while another pauses to stretch, arms raised toward the sky. This is not an expedition. There is no sense of danger here. It is a familiar trail, one that has been walked countless times by locals and visitors alike. A hike meant to clear the mind, to escape routine, to feel small in a way that feels comforting rather than frightening. The plan is simple. Up the trail, a scenic overlook by midday, back before nightfall. Dinner reservations are already made. Someone jokes about sore legs tomorrow. Another promises to send photos once they reach the top. The trailhead sign stands weathered but sturdy, its lettering dulled by years of sun and rain. Rules are posted. Stay on marked paths. Carry enough water. Be mindful of changing weather. They are read, nodded at, mostly ignored. Not out of arrogance, but familiarity. This mountain has never caused problems before. It is known, predictable, almost friendly. As they step onto the trail, the world shifts subtly. The sound of the parking lot fade, replaced by the soft rhythm of boots against dirt and stone. Leaves rustle overhead. Birds move unseen through branches. Sunlight filters down in broken patterns, painting the path with light and shadow. The air smells of pine and damp earth, sharp and clean. Conversation flows easily at first. Small talk, stories from work, complaints about how busy life has been lately. This hike is framed as a pause, a break from noise, from screens, from obligations. Phones are tucked away, their signals already beginning to weaken. No one notices. No one is worried. The trail inclines gently, winding through dense forest. Roots cross the path like veins, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. There are markers nailed to trees, faded but visible, reassuring in their presence. This is a maintained route, a safe route, a route meant to guide people back again. At one point, someone stops to take a photo. The mountain in the background, the trees framing the shot just right. It will later become one of the last confirmed images of this day, though no one knows it yet. In the photo, everything looks perfect, peaceful, alive. They walk deeper, the canopy thickening above them. The light grows softer, more diffused. The air cools slightly. Jackets are tied around waists. Water bottles are passed back and forth. A comment is made about how quiet it feels, but it's said with appreciation, not unease. Silence here is a luxury. Time passes without being measured. Watches are glanced at casually, not with concern. The group slows occasionally, not out of fatigue, but to admire the view where the trees open briefly, offering glimpses of the valley below. Far away, the world continues. Cars move, people work, phones ring, but none of that feels real up here. The mountain creates its own sense of time, stretching moments longer than they should be. There is a subtle shift as they move farther from the trailhead. The path narrows slightly. The ground becomes uneven, still safe, still manageable, but different enough that the change is felt, even if it isn't acknowledged. One hiker walks a few steps ahead. Another lags behind to retie a bootlace. The group stretches, contracts, then comes back together again. If there's a moment when things could turn back, it passes unnoticed. The mountain remains quiet. Not ominous, not hostile, just quiet. Wind moves gently through the trees, carry with it the distant sound of something falling. Maybe a branch, maybe a rock dislodged by an animal. It draws no attention. Nature makes noise all the time. As they continue, the trail bends, obscuring what lies ahead. What cannot be seen is accepted without question. The markers are still there. The ground still feels solid beneath their feet. There's no sense of being watched, no chill crawling up the spine, nothing that would later make sense as a warning. This is the cruelest part of the story, that there's no dramatic signal, no cinematic moment where danger announces itself. The day remains beautiful. The hikers remain relaxed. Their trust in the mountain is complete. Somewhere along the trail, conversation thins, not because of fear but contentment. The kind of silence that settles naturally when people are comfortable with one another. Footsteps fall into rhythm. Breathing steadies. The mountain absorbs their presence without reaction. They pass others briefly. Strangers head in the opposite direction, offering nods and quick greetings. Beautiful day, someone says. Perfect weather, another replies. These fleeting interactions will later become fragments, tiny confirmations that yes, they were here. Yes, they were seen. Yes, everything seemed normal. Eventually, the group reaches a point where the trail forks, one path continuing upward, the other veering off toward a lesser-used route that promises a slightly better view. The sign is there, though weathered, its arrow crooked. A short discussion follows. Nothing intense, just a decision made lightly, confidently. They choose the path that seems more interesting, not knowing how much weight that choice will someday carry. The mountain does not respond. It does not warn them away. It simply allows them to pass. As they move forward, their figures grow smaller against the vastness of the trees and rock. The trail curves again, and one by one, they slip out of sight, swallowed by the landscape. The forest closes in behind them, erasing their footsteps almost as soon as they are made. This is the last time the day feels whole. By afternoon, the sun will begin its slow descent. By evening, questions will start forming. By night, worry will set in like a physical ache. But for now, for this brief, fragile stretch of time, the hikers are simply walking, alive, unafraid, unaware that this ordinary morning will soon become a reference point, replayed endlessly in the minds of those left behind. The mountain stands unchanged, patient and silent, already holding the end of the story that no one yet knows has begun. Evening arrives softly at first, the way it always does. The sky shifts from blue to gold, light thinning as the sun lowers behind the ridgeline. In houses miles away from the mountain, lamps are switched on. Dinner is prepared. The day folds in on itself without resistance. No one knows yet that something is wrong. At first, the delay feels reasonable. Hiking plans are flexible by nature. Trails take longer than expected. Views invite lingering. A wrong turn can be corrected. Phones lose signal. These explanations come easily, offered almost automatically by the people waiting at home. There is comfort in rationality, comfort in believing the world still follows its rules. A phone is checked. No message. Another few minutes pass. Still nothing. The silence is noticed but not feared. Not yet. As the sky darkens, concern begins to form, not sharp or panicked, but dull and persistent, like pressure behind the eyes. Someone steps outside and looks toward the mountain, now a dark silhouette against the fading light. It feels strange that it looks exactly the same as it did that morning. Solid, unmoved, indifferent to the passage of time. A call is made. It goes straight to voicemail. Another call follows, then another. The tone changes. Conversations become shorter, tighter. People begin to say things they don't fully believe. They're probably fine. They must be on their way down. There's no signal up there. Night settles in, complete and unavoidable. The temperature drops. Crickets begin their steady chorus. Inside, the waiting becomes heavier. The absence is no longer passive. It presses in, demanding to be acknowledged. By now, the explanations start to thin. Phones should have connected by now. Headlamps should be visible on the trail. The parking lot should show signs of activity. Someone drives out just to check. The road leading toward the mountain feels longer than usual, darker. Headlights cut through the trees, revealing nothing but stillness. The parking lot is quiet. Too quiet. The cars are still there, exactly where they were left that morning. Doors locked. No movement. No voices. No sign that anyone has returned. This is the moment when waiting transforms into fear. Back at home, the first call to authorities is made with hesitation, as if saying the words out loud might make them real. Names are given, descriptions offered, the last known plan repeated carefully, hoping precision will somehow compensate for the growing uncertainty. On the other end of the line, the response is calm, measured, standard questions, standard procedures. There is reassurance, but it feels thin, stretched over something fragile. Time slows in unnatural ways. Minutes drag, hours lose shape. Every sound feels louder than it should. Every vibration of a phone sends a jolt through the body, followed almost immediately by disappointment. Nothing, still nothing. The mountain, now invisible in the darkness, feels closer than ever. Authorities advise waiting until morning before launching a full search. It makes sense. Night searches are dangerous. Visibility is poor. Risks multiply. Logic insists on patience. Emotion refuses to cooperate. How can anyone wait when people are missing in the cold, in the dark, in a place that does not forgive mistakes? Sleep becomes impossible. Those who try lie awake, staring at ceilings, replaying the morning in fragments. Was there anything unusual? A comment that fell off? A hesitation that went unnoticed? Memory reshapes itself under pressure, searching desperately for clues that might have been missed. Somewhere, someone imagines footsteps on the trail, in the dark, a twisted ankle, a call for help that no one hears. The mind fills the silence with images it cannot escape. Morning finally comes, pale and unwelcome. It brings no relief. The mountain emerges from the darkness, unchanged, serene in the early light. There is something unsettling about how normal it looks, as if nothing has happened at all. By now, urgency sharpens. Official reports are filed. Search and rescue teams are contacted. Volunteers begin to gather, pulled by a mix of concern, familiarity with the terrain, and the unspoken understanding that this could happen to anyone. Names are spoken more often now, anchored to fear. These are no longer hikers enjoying a day outdoors. They are missing persons. The first search efforts begin with methodical calm. Trailheads are checked. Routes are mapped. Last known locations are discussed in careful detail. Each step is documented. Every decision weighed. On paper, everything feels controlled. On the ground, anxiety hums beneath every movement. Loved ones hover at the edges of the operation, desperate for updates, clinging to belief that this is still a rescue, not a recovery. Words matter now. People listen closely, analyzing tone as much as content. A neutral expression can feel like bad news. A pause can feel unbearable. As the day progresses, hope and fear coexist uneasily. Each passing hour without contact stretches nerves thinner. Every searcher returning from the trail is watched closely, their faces scanned for signs of discovery. A shake of the head. A quiet, nothing yet. Again and again. The mountain offers no answers. No sound. No signal. It absorbs the effort without reaction. By afternoon, exhaustion begins to set in, not just physical, but emotional. The realization starts to creep in, unwelcome and unspoken. Something is wrong in a way that cannot be easily fixed. This is no longer just a late return. This is no longer just a lost signal. Still, hope refuses to leave. It adapts. Maybe they found shelter. Maybe they took an unexpected route. Maybe they are waiting somewhere, conserving energy, assuming someone will come. As night approaches again, the fear deepens. Darkness is no longer just the absence of light. It is a threat. The idea of spending another night, unanswered, feels unbearable. Search teams prepare to pause once more, bound by safety protocols. The mountain grows quiet again, and in that quiet, the silence becomes something else entirely. It is no longer empty. It is full of questions of dread, of the unbearable knowledge that the world has shifted, even if no one can yet explain how. The hiking trip that began with laughter and light has ended in something far heavier. No goodnight messages arrive. No reassurance breaks through. Only the mountain remains, holding its distance, as the people waiting below begin to understand that this silence may not be temporary at all. Morning brings movement, but not relief. The mountain wakes under a pale sky as search and rescue vehicles line the access road, their presence breaking the natural quiet. Doors open and close. Radios crackle softly. Boots hit the ground with purpose. This is no longer a personal worry carried by a few families. It has become an operation. The search begins with confidence. There's a plan. Maps are spread across hoods of vehicles. Fingers tracing trails and ridgelines. The hikers' intended route is clear. Their starting point confirmed. Their vehicles still parked exactly where they were left. From a logistical standpoint, this should be straightforward. People do not simply vanish on marked trails, not without leaving something behind. Teams move out in coordinated lines, spacing themselves carefully. They call out names at regular intervals, their voices carrying briefly through the trees before dissolving into the vastness. Dogs are brought in, noses low to ground, handlers watching closely for any change in behavior. Helicopters lift into the air, their rotors chopping the silence into fragments as they scan from above. For the families watching from perimeter, this is the moment hope surges again. There is comfort in numbers, in the visible effort, in the belief that expertise will bring answers. The mountain, after all, is not infinite. It has boundaries. Trails intersect. Mistakes lead somewhere. The first hours pass quickly, filled with activity and cautious optimism. A dropped glove could mean something. A disturbed patch of earth invites scrutiny. Every sound is investigated. Every anomaly noted. Radios report in regularly. Negative contact. Continuing sweep. As the day wears on, the reality of the terrain begins to assert itself. What looks manageable on a map reveals hidden complexities on foot. Ravines cut deeper than expected. Underbrush thickens. Slopes become steeper, looser. The forest hides more than it reveals, its density swallowing sound and sight alike. Searchers remain disciplined, but the initial confidence starts to fray at the edges. The dogs lose the scent at unpredictable points, circling, confused. Weather shifts subtly. Cloud cover thickens, wind picks up, carrying away voices and scents. None of this is dramatic enough to halt the search, but each small complication adds weight. By midday, the first uncomfortable question surfaces quietly among team leaders. Where are the signs? There should be something. Footprints off trail, broken branches, a backpack strap snagged on a limb. Even in accidents, evidence usually announces itself. People leave traces without trying. The absence of those traces is not reassuring. It is deeply unsettling. Helicopters report nothing from above. The canopy is thick, limiting visibility. Shadows play tricks on the eye, turning rocks into shapes that almost resemble movement, almost resemble answers. Almost is never enough. Families are updated with careful language. No findings yet is repeated like a mantra, stripped of emotion. Each time it is spoken, it lands heavier. The words mean progress is being made, but they also mean that progress has led nowhere. The search expands. Additional teams are brought in. Grid patterns widen beyond the planned route, accounting for the possibility of a wrong turn, a misjudgment, a momentary lapse. Trails that branch off are followed to their ends. Lookouts are checked. Water sources are scanned carefully, eyes lingering on dark pools longer than they want to. The mountain remains unresponsive. As afternoon fades, fatigue sets in. Searchers rotate out, faces streaked with dirt and sweat. They drink water, exchange brief words, then head back out. No one wants to be the one who stops. Stopping feels too close to giving up. By evening, the atmosphere has changed. The energy that once buzzed with expectation now feels heavy, subdued. Radios crackle less frequently. The repetition of negative reports begins to wear down even the most seasoned professionals. This is no longer a standard operation. It is becoming something else, something harder to define. A meeting is called. Maps are revisited. Areas crossed off. Strategies adjusted. The possibility that the hikers are injured but alive is still discussed, still prioritized. But beneath that hope runs an unspoken current. The longer this goes on, the less likely it becomes. Night falls again, and with it comes another pause. For safety reasons, most teams pull back. Floodlights illuminate small sections of the trailhead, casting harsh light against the surrounding darkness. Beyond that, the mountain disappears once more into shadow. Families return home reluctantly, instructed to rest, to wait. Waiting has already begun to feel unbearable, but now it is enforced by protocol. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and fragmented, haunted by images of searchers calling into empty woods. Day 2 begins with renewed effort, but diminished optimism. More resources arrive. Media presence grows quietly at the edges. Cameras kept at a respectful distance for now. Questions begin to form in whispers. How could they have missed them yesterday? How much ground is left? Search dogs are rotated. New handlers attempt fresh tracks. Again, the scent appears briefly, then vanishes, as if dissolving into ground itself. Some interpret this as weather interference. Others say nothing at all. The terrain grows more dangerous as teams push farther out. Steep drop-offs are navigated with care. Dense areas are probed slowly, methodically. Each step carries a knowledge that searching itself carries risk, that the mountain can claim more if it is not respected. Still, nothing. By the end of the 3rd day, the search has covered areas that should have yielded something. Anything. The logic that once anchored the operation begins to falter. People are not supposed to disappear like this. Not here. Not without explanation. Team leaders begin to consider the unthinkable, that the hikers may not be within the primary search area at all. That assumptions made early on may have been wrong. That the mountain may be hiding them in ways no one anticipated. For the families, the shift is devastating. It feels like the ground moving beneath their feet, just as it did for the missing hikers somewhere above. Hope does not vanish, but it changes shape, becoming thinner, more fragile. The search continues, day after day, driven by duty, by compassion, by the refusal to accept silence as an answer. But with each passing hour, the mountain's refusal to give anything back becomes more pronounced. What was once a rescue begins, quietly and without announcement, to lean towards something darker. The mountain stands unchanged, absorbing voices, footsteps, and expectation alike, offering nothing in return. Only the growing realization that this search, as thorough as it is, should have found them by now. As the active search begins to slow, a different kind of attention settles over the mountain. The urgency of movement gives way to observation, to reflection, to the unsettling awareness that this place may not simply be a backdrop to the disappearance, but a participant in it. When people stop expecting immediate answers, they begin to listen differently. From a distance, the mountain looks unchanged, solid, patient, ancient. It has stood through seasons, storms, and generations of human presence. Trails cut across its surface like faint scars, easily healed by time and growth. To the casual eye, it appears generous, even inviting. But those who know it well understand that familiarity does not equal safety. Locals speak about the mountain with a certain respect, bordering on caution. They tell stories not to frighten, but to warn, whether that turns without notice. Fog that rolls in so thick it erases direction, paths that seem to bend and shift when light fades. These stories are not dramatic. They are matter-of-fact, delivered with the quiet seriousness of people who have learned lessons the hard way. The mountain has claimed people before, not often enough to make headlines, but often enough to leave a mark on the collective memory of the community. Hikers who slipped and were found days later in places no one thought to look. Experienced outdoorsmen who underestimated a slope or overestimated their stamina. Most of those stories ended with recovery, sometimes rescue, sometimes not. But always there was evidence, a trail of some kind. This disappearance feels different. As days stretch into weeks, the mountain silence becomes more noticeable. It is not just the absence of the missing hikers. It is the absence of disturbance. No signs of struggle. No equipment scattered across the terrain. No natural disaster that could explain a sudden loss. The forest appears undisturbed, as if it has carefully closed itself back up after allowing the hikers to pass. Searchers who return to the mountain after the initial efforts describe a strange sensation, a feeling of being watched, not in a supernatural sense, but in the awareness of how small and temporary human presence is here. Voices disappear quickly among the trees. Footsteps leave no lasting impression. The mountain does not respond to human concern. It simply exists. Geologically, the terrain is complex. Beneath the surface lie crevices, sinkholes, and uneven rock formations hidden by soil and vegetation. In some areas, a single misstep can send someone sliding into places that are nearly invisible from above. These features are known, mapped in parts, but never fully. Nature rarely offers complete transparency. The forest itself is dense, layered, designed to obscure. From the air, the canopy looks uniform, masking the chaos below. Fallen trees, sharp drop-offs, narrow ledges. Light behaves differently here, fractured and unreliable. What seems close can be far. What appears solid may not be. Over time, the mountain takes on a symbolic weight. It becomes a vessel for unanswered questions, a physical representation of uncertainty. People speak about it in hushed tones now, not out of superstition, but out of respect for its capacity to keep what it takes. There are those who suggest that the mountain does not give up its secrets easily. That time, erosion, and chance are often the only forces capable of revealing what lies hidden. This is not said with menace, but resignation. The mountain operates on a different scale of patience. For the families, this shift in narrative is deeply unsettling. The idea that the mountain itself may be responsible, not through malice, but through indifference, offers no one to blame, no action to take. How do you argue with something that does not listen? Attempts are made to understand the terrain more deeply. Experts are consulted. Maps are reviewed again, this time with an emphasis on what might have been overlooked. Areas deemed low probability are reconsidered. Still, the sheer size and complexity of the mountain makes certainty impossible. As months pass, the seasons begin to change. Summer gives way to fall. Leaves drop, briefly revealing ground that was once hidden, only to be covered again by snow in winter. Each transformation alters the mountain's surface, shifting what can be seen and what remains concealed. Hope rises and falls with each seasonal change, only to recede again. The mountain, meanwhile, continues its quiet work. Rain washes away traces. Wind redistributes debris. Roots grow and shift, slowly reclaiming space. Time moves forward without acknowledgement of human loss. Those who return to the trail speak of an eerie normalcy. Birds still sing. Sunlight still filters through branches. New hikers arrive, unaware of the story beneath their feet. Life continues in parallel, indifferent to unresolved tragedy. And yet, for those who know, the mountain feels different now. Every path carries a question. Every overlook feels heavier. The knowledge of what might be hidden just beyond sight changes the way the landscape is experienced. The mountain has not changed, but perception has. In the absence of answers, the mountain becomes a silent keeper, not actively withholding information, but unwilling to offer it freely. It demands patience, endurance, and acceptance of uncertainty. These are not qualities easily embraced by people searching for closure. The longer the silence stretches, the clearer it becomes that the mountain is not something to be conquered or outweighted. It will reveal what it chooses, when it chooses. And until then, it will remain exactly as it has always been, vast, indifferent, and holding tightly to whatever secrets now lie within its depths. In this stillness, a new understanding takes root, that the disappearance may not be something that can be solved quickly or neatly or at all, that the mountain, in its quiet permanence, may outlast questions being asked of it. And so, the search does not truly end. It transforms. It moves from the ground into memory, into speculation, into the long, uneasy relationship between humans and a landscape that does not owe them answers. When answers fail to appear, stories rush in to fill the space. They begin quietly, almost responsibly, attempts to make sense of what logic alone cannot explain. At first, people speak in cautious hypotheticals. Maybe there was an accident. Maybe the hikers wandered farther than planned. Maybe weather played a role. These early theories are gentle, rooted in realism, and offer with care. But uncertainty is rarely patient. As days stretch into weeks, the need to explain grows louder, more urgent. Speculation spreads beyond the immediate circle of family and search teams, seeping into the wider community. Each person who hears a story adds something of their own, reshaping it to fit personal fears, beliefs, and experiences. Some theories lean toward misadventure, a fall into an unseen ravine, a sudden medical emergency. an injury that left someone unable to move, forcing the others to choose between staying or seeking help. These ideas are painful, but familiar. They allow the disappearance to remain an accident, tragic, but understandable. Others move in darker directions. Whispers begin about the possibility of foul play. The mountain, after all, is isolated. Trails cross paths with strangers. It is not impossible that someone else was there that day, unseen, unknown. The idea introduces a human antagonist, someone to blame, someone who chose harm. For some, this explanation feels more comforting than randomness. At least it offers intention. Law enforcement addresses these rumors carefully, emphasizing the lack of evidence pointing to criminal activity. But absence of evidence does little to quiet imagination. In the vacuum left by facts, suspicion thrives. There are those who suggest the disappearance was intentional, that the hikers chose to vanish, to leave their lives behind. This theory often comes from outsiders, people untouched by the emotional weight of the loss. It is spoken with certain detachment, as if walking away from everything is a simple act. For the families, this idea cuts deeply, implying abandonment rather than misfortune. Online discussions amplify everything. Forums and comment sections become echo chambers, where speculation evolves unchecked. Armchair investigators analyze photos, trail maps, timelines. Every detail is scrutinized, often without context. Innocent actions are reframed as suspicious. Coincidences are elevated to clues. The hikers, once ordinary people, are transformed into characters in a story others feel entitled to rewrite. Local legends resurface as well. Stories long dismissed as folklore gain new attention. Tales of people getting lost only to emerge miles away with no memory. Accounts of strange lights, disorienting fog, and unexplained sounds. These narratives are shared not necessarily because they are believed, but because they offer something concrete when reality refuses to cooperate. The mountain becomes a canvas onto which fear is projected. Each theory says more about the person proposing it than about the truth itself. Some cling to logic, others to mystery. Some seek closure, others crave intrigue. Few stop to consider the emotional cost of this speculation on those still waiting for answers. For the families, hearing these theories is a relentless burden. Every suggestion reopens wounds, forcing them to imagine scenarios they never asked to consider. Hope becomes complicated. Belief fractures under the weight of too many possibilities. Still, even among loved ones, theories form quietly, unspoken. It is impossible not to wonder. Minds return again and again to the same questions. What if they took a different path? What if someone made a mistake and didn't want to admit it? What if help was closer than anyone realized? These thoughts arrive uninvited, often late at night, when silence makes room for doubt. Authorities attempt to maintain focus on evidence, but they are not immune to uncertainty either. With no clear direction, investigations stall. Leads dry up. Tips come in, most of them vague, some well-meaning, others fueled by imagination. Each must be checked, documented, dismissed. The process is slow and often fruitless. As months pass, the story begins to harden into something fixed, repeated. Certain theories gain traction simply because they have been repeated often enough. Others fade away. The truth, whatever it is, remains elusive, untouched by speculation. The danger of these narratives is not just misinformation, it is distraction. Attention drifts from the reality of the missing hikers to the entertainment value of the mystery. The disappearance becomes a topic, a case, a story to be consumed rather than a tragedy still unfolding. In this shift, empathy thins. Some begin to treat the mountain as something cursed, a place to be avoided or sensationalized. Others dismiss the entire case as unsolvable, a cautionary tale with no lesson beyond be careful. Both perspectives flatten the human complexity of what has been lost. And yet, speculation continues because silence is unbearable. Humans are storytellers by nature. When facts end, imagination takes over, not out of cruelty but desperation. For the families, the challenge becomes filtering through the noise to hold on to what matters. They learn to tune out rumors, to protect themselves from narratives that offer nothing but pain. Still, the damage lingers. Words, once spoken, cannot be unheard. The mountain remains unchanged, unmoved by the stories told about it. It does not confirm or deny any theory. It offers no reaction, no hint of agreement or contradiction. It simply stands, vast and indifferent, allowing humans to argue and imagine beneath its shadow. In the end, the theories do not bring clarity. They multiply confusion. They create versions of events that cannot all be true and yet refuse to disappear. The truth remains somewhere beyond reach, untouched by speculation, waiting or not waiting at all. And so, the mystery deepens, not because new information has emerged, but because the human need to explain has outpaced the ability to know. When the world's attention begins to drift, the families remain. They are the constant presence in a story that keeps trying to move on without them. While searches slow and theories circulate, their lives narrow around a single, unresolved moment. Time continues forward, but it does so unevenly, pulling everyone else ahead while leaving them suspended in the space between hope and grief. In the early days, support is abundant. Friends check in daily. Neighbors bring food. Voices offer reassurance. Even when no one knows what to say, there is a sense of shared concern, of collective waiting. But as weeks turn into months, the calls become less frequent. Life demands attention elsewhere. The absence remains, but it becomes quieter, more private. Inside their homes, nothing feels settled. Bedrooms remain untouched. Shoes stay where they were last kicked off. Jackets still hang on hooks, carrying the faint scent of the person who never came back. These objects become both comfort and torment, tangible proof that the missing were real, that they existed beyond headlines and speculation. Birthdays arrive and pass. Holidays feel wrong, stripped of their meaning. There is no clear way to mark time when the past refuses to resolve. Should a cake be baked? A gift purchased? A chair left empty? Every decision feels loaded, as if choosing one path means betraying another. Sleep becomes difficult. Nights stretch long and restless, filled with half-formed dreams and sudden awakenings. The mind replays possibilities endlessly, searching for an outcome that feels survivable. Hope persists, but it changes shape, becoming quieter, more cautious, as if afraid of being noticed. There's a unique pain in not knowing whether to grieve. Mourning implies finality, and finality feels like surrender. But waiting carries its own cost, an emotional limbo that drains energy and joy from everything else. The families learn to live with this contradiction, even as it wears them down. Relationships strain under the weight of uncertainty. Partners cope differently. Some need to talk constantly, to revisit details, to keep the missing present through memory. Others retreat into silence, unable to bear repetition. Misunderstandings grow. Patience thins. Love is tested not by conflict, but by exhaustion. Parents of the missing often experience a different kind of torment. The instinct to protect, to fix, to bring their child home has no outlet. They feel powerless in a way that defies logic, haunted by the knowledge that there is nothing they can do. Their identity as caregivers feels fractured, unfinished. Friends struggle too, unsure of their place. They want to help, but do not know how. Over time, they fear saying the wrong thing, and so they say less. Distance grows, not from lack of care, but from discomfort. Some family members return to the mountain on their own. They walk parts of the trail, hoping proximity will offer insight or peace. The experience is rarely comforting. The landscape feels both familiar and hostile, beautiful and cruel. Every step invites imagined scenarios, each more painful than the last. Still, they go back because not going feels worse. Years begin to pass, marked by anniversaries that reopen wounds. Media attention flickers briefly, then fades again. The families learn to navigate interviews, to repeat the same information, the same pleas, even as their voices grow tired. They become advocates not by choice but necessity. There is anger beneath the sadness, anger at the mountain, anger at systems that cannot provide answers, anger at the world for continuing so easily. This anger is often swallowed, hidden beneath a more socially acceptable patience, but it simmers, persistent and unresolved. Hope, when it appears, can be triggered by the smallest things. A phone call from an unknown number, a reporter remains found elsewhere, a tip That sounds almost plausible. Each time, the heart lifts and breaks in quick succession. The cycle is brutal, but impossible to escape. Some family members begin to talk about closure, though the word feels foreign. Closure suggests an ending, and endings feel inappropriate. What they seek is not an answer, necessarily, but peace, a way to carry the uncertainty without being crushed by it. Faith is tested in complicated ways. Some find comfort in belief. Others lose it entirely. Questions about fairness, purpose, and fate surface without warning. There are no satisfying responses, only personal reckonings. Despite everything, life insists on continuing. Children grow. Jobs demand attention. Responsibilities cannot be postponed indefinitely. The families learn to function again, but functioning is not healing. It is survival. The missing are never truly absent from their thoughts. They appear in quiet moments, in memories sparked by music, by a place, by a shared joke. Their presence lingers, intangible but constant. The mountain remains in the background of all of this, a fixed point in a shifting emotional landscape. It is spoken about less often, but it is never forgotten. It represents both hope and fear, a place that could still hold answers or confirm the worst. Waiting becomes a way of life, not dramatic, not visible, but deeply ingrained. It shapes how the families see the world, how they relate to others, how they imagine the future. And through it all, they remain, enduring, remembering, holding space for people who vanish into a silence that is yet to break. As time stretches on, the disappearance begins to settle into a different category, one defined less by urgency and more by resignation. The case does not end, but it cools, slowly and quietly, like embers left unattended. There is no announcement when this shift happens, no single moment when everyone agrees that hope has dimmed. It simply becomes harder to sustain the intensity that once fueled the search. Official involvement changes first. Investigators who once checked in regularly begin to rotate to other assignments. New cases demand attention, each carrying their own immediacy. Files are reorganized, moved from active stacks to archived ones, still accessible but no longer central. The language shifts subtly from when we find them to if anything new comes up. This transition is devastating in its quietness. For the families, it feels like being asked to accept something they are not ready to name. The disappearance is still unresolved, still painful, but now it exists on the margins of institutional memory. It is no longer urgent enough to command constant resources. Search efforts become sporadic. Volunteers still return to the mountain occasionally, driven by loyalty or personal conviction, but the coordinated sweeps grow rare. Weather, funding, and logistics dictate what is possible. Each canceled search feels like another door closing, even if no one says so out loud. Media attention fades as well. The story, once compelling in its mystery, loses traction without new developments. Editors move on. Viewers forget. Anniversary articles appear briefly, summarizing what is known, what is not, and what might never be answered. Then the silence returns. In the public imagination, the disappearance becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder of nature's unpredictability. It is discussed in abstract terms, detached from the people at its center. Names are remembered less often than circumstances. The human cost becomes secondary to the lesson. For those closest to the missing, this distancing is deeply painful. It feels like erasure, as if the world is slowly agreeing to forget. They are forced to carry the weight of remembrance alone, preserving details that others no longer ask about. The mountain continues to draw hikers. Trails are maintained. Signs are updated. New visitors walk paths unaware of the history beneath their feet. Life around the mountain adapts, absorbing the disappearance into its background noise. Time changes the landscape in subtle ways. Trees fall and grow. Paths shift slightly. What was once familiar begins to look different, even to those who know it well. The mountain does not preserve scenes the way memory does. It reshapes them. Investigators revisit the case occasionally, usually prompted by new information elsewhere or renewed interest from a family member. Each review brings the same frustration. Without evidence, there is little pursuit. The absence that once demanded explanation now resists it entirely. There is a growing acceptance among officials that the case may never be resolved. This acceptance is pragmatic, Not cruel, but it lands heavily. It suggests limits of technology, of resources, of understanding. It acknowledges that some questions remain unanswered not because of neglect, but because answers are genuinely out of reach. The families feel this shift acutely. Conversations with authorities become shorter, more formal. Updates grow rarer. They learn to read between the lines, to recognize when optimism is procedural rather than sincere. Emotionally, this period is marked by a different kind of grief. The rawness of early loss is dulled, replaced by something heavier and more enduring. It is not the pain of shock, but the ache of permanence, the understanding that this uncertainty may stretch on indefinitely. Some family members begin to step back from active searching, not because they've given up, but because a constant effort has become unsustainable. Others cannot stop, clinging to routines that keep the missing present. These differences create tension, even within families united by loss. The case's cold status brings an unexpected isolation. Without regular updates or communal concern, loved ones feel increasingly alone in their vigilance. They become custodians of memory, repeating details to ensure they are not lost time. Occasionally, something stirs, a potential lead, a reported sighting, a discovery elsewhere that briefly reignites hope. Each time, attention flares, then fades when the lead dissolves. The cycle becomes familiar, almost expected. Anticipation is tempered by experience. The mountain remains unchanged in its role. It neither confirms nor denies the fading of human interest. It stands as it always has, indifferent to classifications like cold case. Time operates differently here. Decades mean nothing to stone and soil. As years pass, new generations grow up hearing fragments of the story, if they hear it all. The disappearance becomes part of local lore, mentioned occasionally, often inaccurately. Details blur. What was once precise becomes approximate. For the families, this erosion of truth is frightening. They worry not only about finding answers, but about preserving accuracy. They correct misconceptions when they can, even when it hurts to revisit the past. There's a cruel irony in cold cases. The longer they remain unresolved, the less likely resolution becomes. Evidence degrades. Memories fade. Witnesses move on or pass away. Time becomes an adversary rather than an ally. And yet, the families persist. They keep files. They mark anniversaries. They speak names aloud, refusing to let them disappear as completely as their bodies have. The case may be cold in official terms, but emotionally, it remains alive, burning quietly, steadily, in the hearts of those who cannot afford to forget. Decades pass in a way that feels both fast and impossibly slow. The mountain remains, unchanged in silhouette but altered in countless small ways. Trees grown taller, trails rerouted, sections eroded and rebuilt. What once felt like a fresh wound has faded into scar tissue for the world at large, even as it remains tender for those who remember. And then, without warning, something happens. It is not planned. It is not the result of renewed investigation or technological advancement. It begins the way so many revelations do, by accident. A person is on the mountain for reasons entirely unrelated to the disappearance. Maybe it is a hiker who strays slightly off a marked path. Maybe it is a worker assigned to maintenance or environmental assessment. Maybe it is the mountain itself, altered by storms or erosion, finally shifting enough to expose what is kept hidden. The exact circumstances matter less than the fact that no one is looking for answers any more when they appear. At first, there's confusion. What is seen does not immediately register as significant. A shape that looks out of place. Something weathered, partially concealed, easy to mistake for debris or rock. It takes a second glance, then a third for the weight of the moment to settle in. The realization arrives slowly, cautiously. No one rushes to conclusions. There is hesitation, a reluctance to name what might be there. Experience has taught everyone involved how fragile hope can be, how dangerous assumption is. But instinct insists that this is not nothing. Authorities are contacted, and the mountain becomes quiet in a way that feels different from before. Not empty, not indifferent, attentive. The area is secured. Movement slows. Words are chosen carefully. Everyone involved understands the gravity of what may have been found and the consequences of being wrong. When confirmation begins to form, it does so in fragments, partial remains, items that once belonged to someone, objects shaped by time and exposure, stripped of their original context, but still unmistakably human in their implication. Nothing is pristine. Nothing is complete. The mountain has not preserved these things. It has transformed them. News travels cautiously at first. Authorities notify families before making any public statements. The conversations are gentle, heavy with pauses and carefully phrased sentences. No promises are made. No conclusions offered. Only the acknowledgement that something has been discovered and that it may be connected to what was lost so long ago. For the families, the moment is surreal. They have lived so long without answers that the idea of discovery feels unreal, almost intrusive. Part of them has learned how to survive without resolution. Now, suddenly, the silence is shifting. Hope returns, but it is not the bright, desperate hope of the early days. It is cautious, restrained, afraid of being broken again. The question is no longer just what happened, but are we ready to know? The mountain becomes a focal point once more. Media interest reignites, though more subdued than before. Reporters speak in measured tones, aware of the time that has passed, the sensitivity of the situation. The story is framed not as breaking news, but as something long awaited finally surfacing. Investigators return to terrain with renewed purpose. Areas once deemed cleared are reassessed. New technology is applied where possible, though time has taken its toll. Soil has shifted. Evidence has degraded. The mountain has had decades to obscure the past. Still, the discovery changes everything. It confirms what many feared but could never prove, that the mountain was not empty, that the silence was not absence, but concealment. Experts examine what has been found with care. Each detail is documented, photographed, analyzed. There is a tension between scientific objectivity and human empathy. These are no longer just remains or artifacts. They are fragments of lives that stop without explanation. The process is slow. Identification takes time. Conclusions are resisted. The temptation to declare closure is strong, but resisted. Everyone involved understands how misleading partial answers can be. For the families, waiting resumes, but it feels different now. The waiting has direction. There's movement, however slow. They are no longer staring into a void, but into a narrowing tunnel, uncertain of where it leads. Emotions collide in unexpected ways. Relief mixes with grief. Validation clashes with dread. For years, they live with uncertainty. Now, certainty, whatever form it takes, threatens to replace it. Some find comfort in this. Others feel a strange sense of loss for fragile hope that once allowed for miracles. The mountain does not offer explanations. It never does. It yields fragments, not narratives. Whatever happened all those years ago remains partially obscured, shaped by time and environment as much as by human action. As news of the discovery spreads, public reaction is restrained but intense. The story feels heavier now, grounded by physical proof. Speculation quiets, replaced by a more solemn tone. This is no longer a mystery in theory. It is a reality unfolding. Yet even with discovery, clarity remains elusive. The evidence answers some questions but raises others. How did they end up here? Why were they not found sooner? What else might still be hidden? The mountain keeps its silence on these matters. What is undeniable is that something long buried has finally surfaced, not through determination or persistence, but through time itself. The mountain has not spoken. It has merely shifted, allowing a glimpse of what it has always held. And in that glimpse, the past presses suddenly and forcefully into the present, reminding everyone involved that even decades of silence cannot erase what was lost, only delay its return. Once something is found, the waiting changes shape again. It becomes quieter, more procedural, wrapped in the language of analysis and probability. Where imagination once ran unchecked, it is now tempered by evidence, limited, fragile, and incomplete. What the mountain gives back is not a story, but fragments, and those fragments must be handled with care. Forensic specialists approach the findings without drama. They have learned that restraint matters. Every object, Every trace is treated as both important and potentially misleading. Time has altered everything. Exposure to weather, soil, and wildlife has stripped away clarity, leaving behind questions that science can only partially answer. Examinations begin slowly. There is no rush to declare conclusions. Identification, when possible, relies on processes that are methodical and emotionally detached by necessity. DNA comparisons, material analysis, environmental context. Each step narrows possibilities but also introduces margins of error that cannot be ignored. What can be determined is limited. Time of death is approximated, not confirmed. Causes discussed in terms of likelihood rather than certainty. Injuries are assessed with caution, acknowledging how easily post-event damage can mimic trauma. The mountain has reshaped what it held, blurring the line between what happened in life and what happened after. Authorities communicate these findings carefully to the families. The conversations are technical, restrained, respectful. There is an effort to avoid false certainty, to resist the urge to simplify what cannot be simplified. This honesty is necessary, but it is also painful. Some questions finally receive partial answers. The remains confirm that at least one of the missing did not leave the mountain, that the disappearance was not voluntary, that the silence was not chosen. These confirmations matter deeply, even as they fail to complete the picture. Other questions remain stubbornly open. The sequence of events is unclear. Whether there was an accident, a series of mistakes, or something else entirely cannot be determined with confidence. The evidence does not argue, it only suggests. Investigators reconstruct scenarios not as definitive narratives, but as possibilities. They consider routes that might explain the location. They examine weather patterns from decades past. They review search records, trying to understand how such a place could have been missed. Each reconstruction is tentative, layered with assumptions that must be acknowledged. There is frustration in this process, both for professionals and for families. Evidence feels like a promise, something tangible after years of nothing, but it does not deliver the kind of clarity people expect. Instead, it offers boundaries, marking what is known and what will likely remain unknown. Public response shifts again. Speculation quiets in the face of scientific language, though it does not disappear entirely. Some are disappointed by the lack of definitive answers, as if the discovery should have solved everything. Others understand, perhaps for the first time, how much time erodes certainty. For the families, the evidence is both grounding and destabilizing. It validates years of waiting, years of refusal to let go, but it also forces confrontation with reality. Hope transforms into grief more concretely now, shaped by facts rather than imagination. There is an unexpected sorrow in learning that answers do not heal the way they are expected to. Knowing does not undo loss. It does not restore what was taken. It simply replaces one form of pain with another. Experts emphasize what the evidence cannot say as much as what it can. This restraint is intentional. Overstatement would be dishonest. The mountain has altered the past too much for clean conclusions. Science can narrow, but it cannot resurrect moments lost to time. Investigators close certain lines of inquiry, while leaving others open, if only theoretically. The case moves again, no longer cold, but not fully resolved. It exists in a gray space, defined by partial closure. For some families, this is enough. They find a measure of peace and confirmation, however incomplete. For others, the unanswered questions remain unbearable, now sharpened by proximity to truth. The mountain stands unchanged through all of this. It does not react to analysis or debate. It does not clarify. It simply exists, indifferent to human efforts to impose meaning. In the end, the evidence speaks quietly. It does not accuse. It does not explain. It confirms loss, outlines possibility, and leaves the rest untouched. What the mountain gives back is not a conclusion, but a boundary, a line between what can be known and what must be accepted as unknowable. And for those who have waited so long, learning to live within that boundary becomes a final, most difficult task. With new information on the table, the past begins to rearrange itself. Moments that once felt settled are pulled apart and examined again, not with panic this time, but with a quieter, heavier awareness. The morning of the hike is no longer just the beginning of a mystery. It becomes a fragile hinge on which everything turns. Details that once seemed harmless take on new weight. The choice of trail, the pace they set, the moment they decided to go a little farther than planned. Each decision is revisited, not to assign blame, but to understand how easily ordinary choices can lead somewhere irreversible. Investigators reconstruct the day with renewed care. Timelines are redrawn. Distances are recalculated. What once appeared straightforward now feels layered, uncertain. The mountain scale, underestimated before, looms larger in these reconstructions. What felt close may have been far. What seemed safe may have been deceptive. The narrative begins to shift, from sudden disappearance to gradual separation, from mystery to miscalculation. Not a single dramatic event, but a sequence of small moments compounding quietly. Fatigue, distraction, confidence born of familiarity. None of it malicious, all of it human. For the families, this reframing is painful in a new way. It suggests that the line between safety and danger was thinner than anyone realized. That survival might have hinged on minutes, on a turn taken or not taken, on visibility that changed too quickly. Memories are interrogated gently but relentlessly. Conversations from before the hike are replayed. Comments once forgotten resurface with new significance. We'll be fine. It's an easy trail. Words meant to reassure now echo differently, stripped of their original innocence. There is guilt here, though no one is truly at fault. Guilt for not insisting on different plans, for not asking more questions, for not sensing what could not be sensed. It is an irrational guilt, but deeply felt. Experts explain how quickly situations can change in environments like this, how disorientation can occur even among experienced hikers, how terrain can funnel people into unexpected areas. These explanations are logical, measured, but logic does not soften their emotional impact. The story that once belonged to rumor and speculation begins to solidify into something quieter and sadder. Not a mystery fueled by intrigue, but a tragedy shaped by circumstance. The mountain is no longer framed as sinister or supernatural, but as vast and indifferent, capable of swallowing people without intention or malice. This shift changes how the disappearance is spoken about publicly. Sensational theories lose their grip. The tone becomes more reflective, more restrained. There is less appetite for drama, more space for empathy. Still, not everything aligns neatly. There are gaps that refuse to close. How certain areas were missed. Why specific traces were not found earlier. These questions linger, resisting final explanation. The new narrative is more grounded, but not complete. For the families, understanding does not erase loss. It reframes it. The pain becomes anchored to reality rather than imagination. Some find this grounding helpful, a way to finally place their grief somewhere solid. Others struggle with the permanence it implies. Returning to the mountain feels different now. For those who go back, the landscape is no longer a symbol of mystery alone, but finality. The paths feel narrower. The distances feel longer. The silence feels heavier, charged with meaning. There's a strange intimacy in knowing more. The missing are no longer suspended in endless possibility. Their story has shape, even if it lacks detail. This shape allows remembrance to settle, to become less frantic. Families begin to speak differently about their loved ones, not only about how they vanished, but about who they were. Stories shift away from the disappearance and back toward life. Laughter returns cautiously to conversations once dominated by fear. This is not closure, but it is movement. The mountain remains unchanged, but the relationship to it transforms. It is no longer the keeper of an unspeakable secret, but the setting of a human story, tragic, incomplete, but real. It no longer needs to be imagined as something monstrous to explain what happened. Understanding replaces some of the fear, though not all of it. There is still sorrow in knowing how fragile safety can be, how quickly certainty dissolves. As the revised story settles, it becomes clear that the disappearance was not defined by a single moment, but by a chain of ordinary decisions intersecting with an extraordinary environment. This realization is unsettling but honest, and in that honesty, the narrative finally begins to rest, not because everything is known, but because it no longer needs to be invented. In the end, What remains is not an answer, but a reckoning, not with the mountain itself, but with the limits of understanding. After decades of questions, searching, imagining, and waiting, there comes a quiet moment when the story stops asking to be solved and begins asking to be carried. The mountain stands as it always has. It does not acknowledge the shift in human perspective. It does not soften, apologize, or explain. It continues to exist on its own terms, shaped by time rather than memory. Trails are still walked. Seasons still turn. Snow falls, melts, and falls again. The world does not pause for resolution. For the families, this realization arrives slowly, unevenly. There is no single moment of acceptance. It comes in fragments, small decisions that signal a change. Packing away files that once lived on the kitchen table. Skipping an anniversary interview. Choosing not to check the phone one more time before sleep. None of these acts mean forgetting. They mean surviving. The missing are no longer defined only by how they disappeared. Over time, they are reclaimed as full people again, remembered for their humor, their habits, the way they move through the world. Stories begin to drift back to earlier memories, to moments untouched by the mountain or the silence that followed. This shift is fragile. Grief does not move in a straight line. There are days when the old questions return with force, when acceptance feels like betrayal. On those days, the mountain feels closer again, looming in the background of thought. But those days pass too. Some families find solace in ritual, annual visits to the trailhead, quiet moments spent near the place where everything changed. Others avoid the mountain entirely, unable to reconcile its beauty with what it took from them. Both responses are valid. Both are acts of self-preservation. There is a strange peace that comes with acknowledging what will never be known. Not a comforting peace, but a steady one. It is built not on answers, but on endurance, on the understanding that uncertainty does not invalidate love or memory or the meaning of what was lost. The mountain, in this context, becomes less an antagonist and more a reminder of scale, of how small human plans are in the face of terrain, weather, time, of how easily the ordinary can become irreversible. For those who hike its trails now, the story lingers quietly. Some know it in detail. Others sense it only vaguely, as a local caution, a half-remembered name. The mountain does not advertise its history. It allows people to walk without knowing, just as it once allowed people to walk without fear. There is no warning sign that can capture the truth of what happened. No plaque that can hold the full weight of decades of waiting. Any attempt to explain would fall short, flattening complexity into summary. And so, the mountain keeps its silence, not as a refusal, but as a fact. In time, the disappearance settles into a different place in collective memory. Not forgotten, but no longer raw. It becomes a quiet marker, a story told with restraint rather than urgency. A reminder shared gently, without spectacle. The families adapt to a life that includes absence but is no longer defined by it. They carry what they need and leave the rest behind. They learn that closure is not a moment, but a process, one that looks different for everyone and never truly ends. Some find meaning in advocacy, in helping others navigate loss or wilderness safety. Others turn inward, finding peace in private ways that require no explanation. There is no right path forward, only the one that allows breathing to feel natural again. The mountain remains unchanged by all of this human effort. It does not grow lighter under the weight of acceptance. It does not respond to forgiveness or understanding. It simply endures. And perhaps that is the final truth of the story, that the mountain never needed to give up its secret, that what mattered was not extracting every answer, but learning how to live alongside the unknown. Silence, once terrifying, becomes something else over time. Not empty, not accusing, just quiet, a space where memory can exist without demanding resolution. The hiking trip ended in silence, but the lives it touched did not. They continued, altered, marked, reshaped, but still moving forward. The mountain did not close the story. People did in their own imperfect ways. And somewhere beneath layers of earth and time, the past rests, not explained, not redeemed, but acknowledged at last as part of a world that does not owe clarity to those who pass through it. The secret the mountain kept was never just about what happened. It was about what remains when answers fail, and the quiet strength it takes to keep living anyway. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check info. Long after the story has settled into its final shape, long after headlines stop circling back and questions stop demanding to be answered, the mountain continues to exist in the same quiet way it always has. Dawn still breaks over its ridges. Fog still gathers in its low places. Wind still moves through its trees without concern for what those trees have witnessed. Time here does not acknowledge human endings. For those who carry the story with them, life becomes an exercise in integration. The disappearance is no longer something that interrupts every thought, but it never fully leaves either. It becomes part of how the world is understood, a lens through which risk, love, and absence are perceived more clearly than before. There are moments when the past returns unexpectedly. A familiar trail name overheard in conversation. A photo of hikers shared online. A weather report that reminds someone of that morning years ago. These moments arrive without warning, but they no longer devastate. They ache briefly, then pass. The families learn that grief does not demand constant attention. It waits patiently, surfacing when it needs to, then receding again. This rhythm becomes manageable, even if it is never fully comfortable. The fear that once defined every quiet moment loses its grip. Some eventually return to the mountain, not out of obligation, but curiosity. They want to see it as it is now, stripped of imagination and fear. They walk carefully, aware of how much meaning they once placed on every stone and shadow. What they find is not revelation, but perspective. The mountain feels smaller than memory made it. Still vast, still complex, but no longer overwhelming. Familiarity dulls the edge of dread. It becomes clear that the mountain did not change. Their relationship to it did. Others never return, choosing instead to let the mountain exist at a distance. This choice is not avoidance, but respect for personal limits. Healing does not require confrontation. Sometimes it requires boundaries. In time, the story is retold less often, and when it is, the tone is different. It is no longer fueled by suspense, but by reflection. Listeners hear as a reminder rather than a warning, as something that happened, not something still unfolding. The absence that once felt unbearable becomes something quieter. It does not disappear, but it no longer demands explanation. It simply exists alongside joy, routine, and forward motion. Children grow up hearing fragments of the story, if they hear it at all. They ask questions, then move on. The weight of the past does not transfer fully. Each generation carries less of it, not out of disrespect, but because time naturally lightens what it touches. This, too, is difficult for those who remember everything. Forgetting feels like loss layered on top of loss. But eventually, it is understood that memory does not need to be universal to be meaningful. What mattered because it was lived, not because it was endlessly recalled. The mountain becomes a symbol again, not of fear, not of mystery, but of continuity. It reminds those who know its story that life moves forward regardless of what remains unresolved. That permanence and impermanence coexist without conflict. There is something grounding in this realization. It releases the pressure to extract meaning from every tragedy. Not everything teaches a lesson. Not every ending serves a purpose. Some events simply happen, and their impact is measured not by explanation, but by endurance. For those left behind, endurance becomes a quiet achievement, not dramatic, not visible, but profound. They learn that peace does not require certainty, that it is possible to honor what was lost without being consumed by how it was lost, that love does not diminish in the absence of answers. It adapts. The mountain keeps no record of these realizations. It does not reflect human growth or understanding. It stands, unmoved, as it always has. But the people who pass through its shadow carry something different now, a deeper awareness of fragility, of scale, of time. In the end, the secret the mountain gave up was incomplete by design. It offered just enough to confirm loss, but not enough to resolve it entirely. What remained was a choice, to continue searching endlessly for certainty or to accept the shape of what could be known. Those who lived the story chose acceptance, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. The hiking trip that ended in silence becomes part of a larger truth about human experience. That some journeys do not return what they take. That some questions linger not as failures, but as reminders of our limits. And so the story closes not with answers, but with continuation. The mountain remains. The people remain. Life unfolds, imperfect and unfinished, carrying forward what it must and releasing what it can. The silence, once terrifying, settles into something quieter and more bearable. Not empty, not meaningless, just still. And in that stillness, the story finally rests, not solved, not forgotten, but allowed to exist as it is.